David, if I take that to you, because I have a question there for you. So that's a global perspective, but you work in insurance and finance. That's your area of expertise. How are that vertical actually working together to try and be combative towards these issues and concerns that we have?
Yeah, thanks, Bridget. I mean, I was actually just going to come on to that point real quick. I had another example. I wasn't going to say that absolutely true. The There was a recent case as well with Cyprus. So I don't know if this was anything you were seeing before reading. So in Cyprus, there was a similar to what you mentioned about Sri Lanka, Russian oligarchs who were moving over to Cyprus and able to essentially move funds through Cypriot businesses. And it was something that the US were watching. And the FBI actually, I think, sent agents to Cyprus to work with the Cypriot government to effectively remove these Russian funds and risks in Cyprus. And I think there was kind of an overhang there of you need to comply with this or face consequences of US sanctions. And I think the US in particular play that card. I think one thing we've got to remember is the US not just claim jurisdiction over the territory, they claim jurisdiction over the US dollar. So in that sense, that's the one thing. So you don't get that with the UK or the EU sanctions, or I don't think many other global sanctions. It's just the US that have that. So it doesn't matter if
Explain
you
that wee bit, David. Explain that, because I think the audience would be interested in that.
No, but so what do I mean by that is essentially trading with an Indonesian company. If you're doing it in US dollars, the US will claim jurisdiction over that transaction. So if at any point in that transaction there is a breach of US sanctions, then either of those countries, regardless of where you are in the world, sanctions tend to be focused on where you are. Are you in the country? Are you a national of the country? Or are you conducting any business through the country? There isn't really much around the currency that's used. Certainly with the euro and the pounds, not so much. But with the dollar, that's where the US also claim jurisdiction. So regardless of where the transaction's happening, if it's in US dollars, they will claim jurisdiction over that. And given it's de facto global currency, it means that they have a very powerful tool to work with. So, and I was also just going to mention the G7 as well. We've started to see a lot of more coordination around Russia with the G7, right, with the oil price cap and the movement of Russian oil. So I think that coordination globally is happening more so than it ever once was. And we're yet to see, I think, fully, but with the UK and Brexit, there might be more alignment between UK and US sanctions as well coming into play. So I think that's also something. But yeah, more I guess in the insurance vertical. Just a bit of background. I came from banking. I've been in insurance now for about 7 years. I was in banking for about 7 or 8 years, and when I was at HSBC before I left to join Beazley. When I was at HSBC, I think there was at that point just about the creation of what's known as, we love acronyms in finance, so it's what's known as JMLIT, so Joint Money Laundering Intelligence Task Force. And that was the first real time within industry that we had a collaborative task force working with law enforcement around money laundering. That I think has since been expanded from banking into other financial service areas, so the likes of asset management and insurance. And that really enables us to understand what law enforcement are working on, what risks they're seeing, what profiles there are, and how we as the private sector can help with that. I mean, we're the ones that tend to hold most of the data for law enforcement to work on. So that's one area. So there's a lot more collaboration around that. I'd say there's a lot more in terms of industry forums. And when I say industry forums, we're looking at verticals around fraud. We're looking at verticals around sanctions. What are we seeing in the sector? What are we able to employ? Who's doing what, and how are they able to do it? I work, Beazley does a lot within shipping and within cyber as well. So within shipping, there's a lot of guidance, there's a lot of red flags, there's a lot of circumvention in sanctions, as Nicola was talking about, with trade-based sanctions circumvention being a big one. So, how are we monitoring vessels? How are we able to detect and understand where there's red flags, ship-to-ship transfers of products, for example, or what's known as your AIS, so the beacon that vessels use to essentially give off location, if that is tampered with, if that is turned off, if that is cloned or masked. Yeah, they can do all of that. So if that's happening, how are you monitoring that? What do you do if that happens? Is that a red flag if it's on its own? I can give just a brief story. That kind of beacon turning off was actually something that insurers were, sorry, the lights keep going off in this room. That's something that insurers were in fact encouraging insureds to do when they were going into regions that were high risk for piracy, right? So around the coast of Somalia, for example, you don't really want to be advertising your location to Somali pirates. So, on the one hand, you had discussions with insureds on turning your beacon off and when to do that. And then on the other side of it, we're now saying that that is potentially a red flag for sanctions evasion. So, you know, these are practical difficulties that you get in terms of red flags and what to watch out for, but then how to actually implement them into actual practice and business as usual becomes quite difficult and quite challenging. So having those industry forums is really important.